we previously were covering, the rule vocabulary in this case is now going to cover not just the decision side of the business terms necessary for the policy origination, but likewise all of the fields relevant to defining what to do when over the course of this dynamic form that we're building. And the front end client side HTML or mobile app, but for now the test drive HTML page, will be reading from the decision service that we will be creating from it. So under vocabulary here, I have this base vocabulary. And let's talk about what we're looking at. Underneath this domain, which is a way of grouping, organizing, structuring our rule vocabulary into this folder of a distinct group of business terms within my rule vocabulary. If I expand that out, I'll see this is where I have a few new elements, but mostly the same general idea of vocabulary entities and attributes that I used in the preceding demo. But what I also have here is what we call the base vocabulary for the dynamic forms. Now, this is important to understand as far as what the hierarchy of these data elements are and how they will be read and interpreted by the front end as we execute the dynamic form. Let's go over at a high level what each of these entities and their respective attributes are responsible for, how they're interpreted by the front end, and then we'll see them actually in action within the rules themselves. So the very top level, the root entity in almost every circumstance of all the rules we'll be creating is this UI entity. I'm going to expand it out, and there are going to be various fields here that are more important than others. Many will be optional, and many might be only relevant when other things are also true about the given stage that I'm creating. So speaking of stages, underneath UI I have that current stage number. So the first thing that we're going to be doing when we create the initial stage of a form will be to create a rule sheet where I will essentially be filtering out every case where the current stage number is not equal to 0. So we're going to introduce the concept of filters for that purpose in order to define which stage number we're currently at, and we'll likewise be defining at each stage within that respective rule sheet what the next stage number will be. Remember that when the decision service is invoked, perhaps saying that the current stage number is 0 with various other data elements being requested, Corticon will interpret that the current stage number is 0, and so it will filter out all except cases where indeed the UI.current stage number equals 0. And Corticon will tell the front end what to render, but also what stage we'll be at when the user hits next thereafter. So those are two fields that we'll be using quite often, and these are just integer data types, of course. There are other things that are optional. Some things are quite necessary, like that path to data. So you may recall that when I opened up this domain, I had this data entity. The reason for that is I am not associating and accruing the data within just the root entity called quote in this case. I'm actually going to be working at a level of the JSON wherein I need to be accruing data fields as a child entity of the root element. The reason for that is that the JSON structure being expected by Corticon to be interpreted is not actually the root element of the root element is not specified in the JSON. So essentially all we need to know for now is when we're building dynamic forms, it's important to have an entity. It can be called whatever you'd like. Data could be called state of Mississippi. But really all that matters here is that that root entity that we've created has an association defined with these specific attributes. One being the name of the entity underneath which we would like to accrue the data. This will be the path to data. In this case, we see that we have property and quote already there. But likewise, I need to make it a one-to-one and a navigability of only data to quote. It cannot go backwards as well. These are all in-depth topics that are worth understanding later on, but not too pertinent for the initial stages here, so we'll leave it as is. So at the initial stage, again, when we're setting UI.currentStageNumber equals 0, that's typically where we'll first be setting what the path to data is, as I did in that demo form. So up front, again, we had that path to data set to be quote. And you'll recall that when I set path to data, I'm not actually referencing, again, that base entity of quote. I'm referencing this association. So that's why we'll see in the rule sheet when I create and define that path to data, it's important to use the name of the association, which is all lowercase quote. It is not the name of the entity, which starts with an uppercase letter, that I'll be using. It's just a matter of convention if you want the association to be all lowercase or start with uppercase. All that matters, and the point here is that we are assigning the path to data to be the name of the association, not to the root entity itself.